we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're going to head up towards Gothenburg once again. Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. We've got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we're reviewing Gothenburg beers, because it is just a bit of a channel tradition. As you'll know if you've watched for any length of time, I say that quite often. But yeah, for this review, we are going to return to a brewery who have featured on the channel a good number of times before. These guys are one of my favourite Swedish breweries, mainly because they try lots of different styles and they tend to do them very, very well. And today we've got a style of beer that I really enjoy, but it's not one that I've had from these guys before, and it's not one that you find all that often, although in fairness I have noticed that there are a couple of breweries having a go at these days. So for this one then, we are going to return to Beerbliotek, and today we're having a taste of the Back to the Middle and Round Again. So this is number 291 according to the Beerbliotek numbering system. It comes in at 8.5% ABV, and this one is an Imperial Red IPA. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. This is the first Imperial Red that I've had from Beerbliotek. I've had lots of different styles of beer from these guys before: barley wines, black IPAs, Imperial Stouts, West Coasters, New Englands, you know, you name it. I've probably had it from these guys, but yeah, this is, as far as I'm aware, the first Imperial Red that I've had from them, so really curious to see how this one turns out. So yeah, this beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskaligt assortment for December of 2020 through Systembolaget here in Sweden. The exact date I believe was the 1st of December, if I'm remembering rightly, but yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the Imperial Red is a style that I really quite like. Probably my first encounter with the red ales would have been the 5am Saint from Brewdog back home in Scotland, but then when I went to New Zealand in 2015 I encountered a beer called First Blood from 8 Wired Brewing Company, and you know, I'm a huge fan of the New Zealand hops, as I've told you in various reviews, and that beer is just one that's always stuck with me, and I've still got a goal of finding a bottle or a can or whatever of that and reviewing it for you on the channel. That's something that I really want to do, so I guess maybe I have to go back to New Zealand at some point fairly soon actually, so that is something that we will need to sort out at some stage. But yeah, I love my Imperial Red IPAs and my Imperial Reds, Red Ales, all of these kind of things. I don't know what it is, there's just something about this style that I really enjoy. Most likely it's the slightly kind of more malty kind of makeup of these beers, I guess, because as you know, I'm a bit of a malt head. I love a good malt base in a beer. So yeah, fingers crossed this one turns out to be another good example of the style, but knowing Beerbliotek, I've got a feeling that it probably will be, so we'll see how we get on. So yeah, looking forward to this one, and I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So let's see how we go. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Beerbliotek before, and you will no doubt see more added to that in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all these Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Beerbliotek then, on to my brewery notes. So Beerbliotek, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded back in 2013 by a multinational group of friends. This is Adam Norman, who's from Australia, Richard Bull, who's from New Zealand, Anders Hedlund, who is Swedish, and Darlin Ecker, who comes from South Africa. So Adam and Richard ran Bar Doppio in Gothenburg, and then Darl and Anders were regular customers, and they often just used to sit and talk about, you know, different beers they'd had, different styles, and all of these kind of things. And one day they decided they wanted to brew their own beer, so they got together, they bought a brew kit, and then they started. And there you go, there you have Beerbliotek, and it's gone quite well for them, we have to say. So the original brewery that these guys had is in the old Klippan Sugar building, which is a really nice old building, and actually very close to the old Carnegie Brewery in Gothenburg. Quite a famous Swedish company that, as I've mentioned before. The brew kit that they had was from Brewfab in Scotland, and in their first year they brewed apparently 38 different varieties of beer, and all of their beers in the early days were just brewed in very small batches because they wanted to stick to the kind of home brewing roots and they very rarely brewed the same beer twice actually. So even today I guess you can say that they don't have a fixed range, but it's definitely fair to say that there are certain beers that are popular, such as a passion for gingers, and there are, you know, a few others in there that always come back. The Instant of Clarity, you know, these kind of things. There are quite a few beers that do come back round every so often. So yeah, they don't have a fixed range, and those regular beers will change and circulate and stuff like this. But they do brew a lot of new beers. These guys are probably, I don't know if you could say they probably are the most prolific brewery in Sweden. These guys, or Omnipollo, I would think, are probably the most prolific brewery in Sweden, come to think of it. But yeah, a bit later on in 2015 they opened a second brewery in Kungston, which is where they now have their main tap room and run their main brewing operations. The old brewery is used mainly for producing sour beers these days, and they're also working on a big barrel aging program at the new brewery as well, so that is definitely worth checking out as well. They've got some really nice beers in that. I think the last one I had was the Would I Lie to You, which was a barley wine, I think, and that was beautifully done. But I do hope they release more of their barrel aged beers through Systembolaget. I think thus far that's been the only one that's come through it actually, unfortunately. And there is a Scotch ale in there that I would love to try. I'd love to see them do some Doppelbox and things like that. That would be awesome. But yeah, I think that's what I really need to try from Beerbliotek next, would be some of the more kind of German style beers actually, and some Belgian things, if indeed they've done those. But the idea behind this brewery's name, Beerbliotek, it's derived from the Latin word bibliotheca, which of course means library. So the main thing that these guys wanted to do was to brew a wide variety of beer so that their customers could always learn something new about some type of hop, you know, a yeast or a malt strain, or, you know, a yeast strain or a malt type or whatever. So that's what they wanted to do. They basically wanted to create a library of beers, and you know, they've been successful with that. They've done quite a lot of different things. But as of December 2020, these guys have produced 265 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, but as I mentioned earlier, this one is number 291, and I know that there are some beers that don't turn out quite as they expected, so they kind of get thrown away. So not all batches of beer see the light of day from Beerbliotek, but there probably will be quite a few sitting in the barrel aging program waiting to be released a little bit later. So I think every so often you will get beers released that are a lower number than ones you might have had previously, so bear that in mind as well. But yeah, a really nice brewery, this one. Like I said, I always enjoy the different beers that I've had from these guys. Probably my favourite ones would be, what would we say, the Eternal Dankness and the Eternal Darkness are both really nice. The Imperial Stout and the West Coast IPA. The Would I Lie to You was great as well. I'm trying to think what else I've had. I've had so many great beers from Beerbliotek over the years, it's really difficult to say, but that's the thing that's really good about this brewery. They always have a go at different styles, and you know, you're pretty much guaranteed a good beer from these guys actually. Beerbliotek don't release bad stuff, in my experience, and you know, you've got a wide variety of things that you can choose from them. So my recommendation would be to choose a style that you personally enjoy, and then try an example of that style from Beerbliotek. You will 99% of the time get a nice beer. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Beerbliotek for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So I'll just like have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. As you can see, this one is a little bit almost, I don't know, you can't really call this psychedelic, but it is quite a kind of modern, but quite simple pattern and stuff, if you like. I do like the artwork that you get on the Beerbliotek beers. You can see on the back there they do have the little flag, the Swedish craft beer, which I really like. That's one of the things I really like about Beerbliotek. They always say, yes, we are a Swedish craft brewery, but it says on the front here, Imperial Red IPA. Our brewers really enjoy brewing new beers or playing with variations in a style. In this case, they're going back to the middle and round again to pay homage to the classic Red IPA. So yeah, this one, as I say, I think this should be quite good. So this one is a 330ml can. I think I paid about 40 or 45 Swedish kroners for this one, but yeah, I think this should be a really interesting one. I mean, 45 kroners, maybe about, yeah, €4.50. Yeah, €4.50, about, yeah, £4, something like that, and then I guess maybe $5 American. So yeah, for an 8.5% Imperial Red, quite happy to pay that. Quite happy to pay that. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So yeah, ooh, look at that. Yes, I think this will be. This is going to be pretty good, I think. Yeah. So, damn, look at that. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. So, yeah, this one, I have to say, this is a lovely looking beer, this. You can see it's poured with a solid 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of light beige fawn coloured head. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there, but overall it does look pretty nice. This beer does have a little bit of a kind of natural haze to it. You guys aren't really going to be able to see that on the camera, but in terms of colour, I would describe this one as being, it's like a very kind of dark coppery colour, this one, maybe a very light mahogany. That's the sort of range in the spectrum you're going to get from this one. Yeah, this, you know, if it's this kind of colour, it will be sort of almost all natural, I guess, if you can say that. But yeah, some of them you can get them and they are a little bit kind of more candy apple red almost, if you like. They do have a little bit more of a kind of almost artificial redness to them, come to think of it. But yeah, this one certainly looks very natural. I would describe this as a kind of copper light mahogany type colour, this one. So this does look very nice. You can see the head is fading away to just be a very thin foamy layer, but you still have a nice kind of fawn coloured ring around the glass there that is quite thick. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass. There's a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there, but I mean overall it does look pretty nice, I have to say. I do think this one goes together quite nicely. So yeah, let's see how we go with this one then. I think this should be quite nice. You can get a few nice aromas out of this already, so yeah, let's take a closer look at it. Ooh, that does smell properly old school, for sure. I'm curious to see whether this one is more bitter or whether it's a slightly lower IBU beer, this one, because the red IPAs were always, I mean, I think the maltiness kind of balanced it out a little bit more, but they always did have a little bit more bitterness to them. But I've got a feeling with the way that the IPAs have gone these days with the haze craze and stuff like this, this one might well be a little bit more kind of reserved, if you like, in terms of its bitterness. But yeah, straight away with this beer, you can smell a lovely, kind of almost brown bready, wholemeally bread backbone to this one. That goes together really quite nicely. It's got an almost kind of grainy malt base. I do wonder if this has got a bit of rye in it. I would think that this is maybe a red rye IPA, if you like. It probably will have some of that. I'm sure we'll be able to figure that out properly when we go to taste it. But there is just something that's telling me there is rye in this beer. It's got that lovely kind of brown bready backbone to it. So yeah, there's a good little bit of a kind of sweet oily caramel coming out of this one. At the same time, the caramel just has a little bit of a kind of toasty element to it. You've got some nice McVitie's digestive qualities in there, that kind of grainy, biscuity, brown sugary sort of thing, so I like that about this beer for sure. Yeah, malt base in this one, as I say, little bit, you know, a little bit of kind of straight up grainy, sort of wholemeal brown bread kind of thing. It's almost, yeah, it almost does have a little bit of that kind of rye bread sweetness to it the more that you smell of it actually. Sweet caramel in there, slightly toasted, and then a bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuit sort of thing coming out of it. So yeah, I like how this one goes together. There's a wee touch of woodiness to the beer as well, and quite often you can get that with these Imperial Reds, but to be honest with you, nothing overly surprising about this one in terms of its malt base, but it is really, really nicely crafty. This one does come across as being, you know, quite classic in a lot of ways, to be honest with you. So yeah, I wonder what malts they've put in this one, if it's like a bit of Cara Red or you know, something like that. Because I think Harry over at Blue Nose Beer Reviews, he's a brewer, and he was telling me that quite often in these Imperial Red IPAs they will put a little bit, you know, something like a Cara Red and things. It was a Weirmann malt from Bamberg that they were using. So yeah, Cara Red I would think is probably what they're using as a base for this one. But yeah, malty wise this one comes across really quite nicely. Hoppy wise then, there's a little bit of earthiness in this one. You do have a little bit of a nice You do have a nice bit of earthiness coming out of this beer. You can smell some nice floral aromatic notes out of this one. I wouldn't say the floral aromaticity in this beer is overly pungent, but it just has a nice kind of resonating kind of carrot quality to it, if that makes sense. You do have a little bit of a lighter kind of grassiness coming out of this beer, which is good. Yeah, definitely a little bit of a lighter kind of grassy quality coming out of this one for sure. But yeah, I'd say that overall the hops in this one are a little bit more, they almost come across as a little bit English in a way, to be honest with you. You've got a bit more earthiness to them, there's a wee bit of a herbal character, some more American floral aromaticity though, and an almost slightly, very very slightly zesty, grassy kind of thing. So yeah, that goes together quite nicely in this one. I think quite often, I'm interested in the hops with these beers, because quite often, you know, a bit of Cascade and a bit of Chinook is quite popular to use in the red IPAs, sometimes a little bit of Amarillo as well, and the fruits that come out of this one do come across as quite familiar. So yeah, on that fruity side of the hops then, I'm pretty sure there's a bit of Cascade in this, because you do have a little bit of that kind of almost soft but figgy type element from the Cascade. I'm getting quite a bit of that out of this beer. So yeah, I've got a feeling that Cascade's been used as one of the hops in this. I wouldn't be surprised if there's Chinook in there though, because you know, you do get a little bit of yeah, you do get a little bit of that kind of slightly grapefruity note to the beer. There's a wee bit of a kind of oily orange coming out of this one as well, which is you know, there is a wee touch of an oily orange to this one, which is a kind of, how would we say, that's more, I think that's got to be an Amarillo in this one. I do think it's got to be a bit of Amarillo, but in fairness it doesn't come across as quite oily enough to be Amarillo. But you know, if you've got Chinook and Cascade in there as well, which I suspect you do, you know, that might well just kind of push that in the background a little bit. But remember, there are other orangey hops such as Mandarina Bavaria, you know, Sabro, Waiti can give you a little bit of a kind of orangey character as well, from what I remember in New Zealand. You've got Azaka, Mosaic, yeah, lots of different kind of possibly orange, candidates. Brain is not working. Lots of possible candidates for an orangey leaning hop for this beer. So yeah, for me, a little bit of an orangey character to this one, some nice softer figgy notes, which I really suspect is Cascade, and I think there might just be a wee bit of Chinook in this one, and there could well be a little bit of Columbus as another bittering thing with this. But the aroma of this one is it comes across as quite old school in terms of the Imperial Red qualities to this one. It does remind me a little bit of the 5am Saint from Brewdog in a number of ways, but yeah, this one's definitely higher in alcohol than that. I think that Brewdog one was about 6% or so. But yeah, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma before you get stuck into it, but we're going to taste this one now. So this one is the Back to the Middle and Round Again, number 291 from Beerbliotek, an Imperial Red IPA from Beerbliotek up in Gothenburg. Like I said, 8.5% ABV. This should be quite interesting. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, this is a pretty, I'm just going to say straight away, this is a pretty nice beer. First impression is that it does come across as it's one of the slightly more grainy red IPAs that I've come across actually. But it does have a fair degree of bitterness as well, which I think is what you need for this style actually. Yeah, I like this one. I'm going to say thumbs up to Beerbliotek for this one. I think it is quite nicely done actually. It's definitely not one of the sweeter Imperial Reds that I've come across. It does have a little bit more. It does have a little bit more of a kind of grainy edge to it and a bit of a roasty toasty kind of thing, but it works. It certainly does work. There's a lot of variety within these Imperial Red IPAs. You can get some that are very, very sweet and caramelly leaning, but you can also get ones like this that are a bit more kind of toasty and grainy, if that makes sense. And this one does have a fair bit of bitterness that lingers into the aftertaste with this one, so I'm pretty sure there's a bit of Chinook and a bit of Columbus in this one for sure, but we'll talk about that later. So yeah, let's try and break down the flavour profile of this beer then. So straight away across the middle of your palate then you can feel a nice bit of that kind of brown bready, wholemealy sort of thing. That just blankets the middle of your tongue. And you can feel that as you go further into the aftertaste with this beer, you really get a nice, you get a nice kind of malt. You do get a nice little bit of a kind of rye, grainy kind of quality coming out of this one as well. The further you go into the aftertaste, the middle of your palate does get a little bit more kind of, you know, toasty and grainy, which I think is very, very good. If you go into the back third of your palate in particular, you can feel that graininess does sort of build up a little bit, and the beer just gets that little bit thicker, which I think kind of suits it as well. So yeah, that nice kind of grainy backbone, which I'm pretty sure is rye. I'm pretty certain there's a bit of rye in this beer. That really kind of complements the more bitter side of this beer too. So yeah, that's quite an interesting point to make about this one. So yeah, the back third of your palate I think is quite grainy, although in fairness it does smoothen out a little bit in the kind of border region between the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate. That's quite an interesting point to take away from this one. So yeah, flavour profile, this is quite nice. I think the beer, while you do get that kind of graininess, that sort of rye graininess from the beer, it does sort of sweeten up a little bit in the middle of the palate the further you go into the aftertaste as well. So yeah, in the very centre of your tongue you will get a kind of boozy, caramelly note out of this one, a boozy, brown, sugary sort of thing. And as you move further out, it's quite oily in the middle of your palate, but then yeah, as you move further out from this one towards the edge of the palate, you start to get more of a kind of McVitie's Digestive, biscuity, kind of grainy sort of thing out of this one. There's one or two, if you go to the front corners of your palate and then move diagonally back, you'll start to get a little bit of you do get a wee touch of a kind of woody undertone to this beer, which is quite interesting as well. So I like how that goes together in this beer for sure. But yeah, I think the beer really does kind of slicken up and sort of smoothen out almost the more that you drink of it. So yeah, it's got a good balance in the malt base, I would say, between the kind of slicker, brown sugary kind of elements and also that kind of more toasty, grainy quality. I think as you drink more and more of this beer, the middle of your palate tends to lean more towards the kind of brown sugary side of things, and it does feel a little bit more toasty the more you drink of it as well. And then the back third of your palate really leans towards that kind of almost rye bready, grainy sort of thing. So that's an interesting point to make about this beer. In terms of the kind of hoppy side of the beer then, in the back corners of the palate you've got a nice little bit of earthiness to this one. You've got a nice little bit of earthiness coming out of it. As you move further forward along the side of the palate, you get the earthiness does spread forward a little bit, but then very quickly it evolves to be more of a kind of dank floral aromatic sort of thing. So that's it does gradually build in its bitterness as you go further into the aftertaste with this one. But yeah, you've got a nice kind of dank floral aromatic note to it. There is a wee bit of spiciness in there, which makes me wonder. You know, I think the resinous quality I think has to be Chinook, but then you've got a bit more of what I would say is you know, a kind of Chinook. Pine resin, actually. I would really say that about this beer. Round the front curve of the palate you've got more of round the front curve of the palate you've got more of a lighter kind of grassy sort of thing, and then on the front curve of your palate, that's where you get, on the front third of your palate, sorry, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So I like how this one goes together in that sense too. So yeah, On that fruity side of things then, if you go towards the back of that front third of your palate, that's where you get a nice little bit of a kind of darker grapefruity quality coming out of the beer. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of how would we say, you do get a little touch of kind of that kind of grapefruity quality does sort of linger there, and then as you move into, you do get a little bit of that lighter kind of figgy kind of note from what I suspect is Cascade. I really think there's a bit of Cascade in this one, so you get a little bit of that lighter kind of figgy Cascade sort of thing coming off it, and then on the front half of that front third of your tongue, you do get more kind of more orangey, oily kind of thing coming out of the beer. So yeah, I do like how this goes together in that sense too. So yeah, it's quite a classic, like really kind of old school red IPA, this one, in terms of how all the flavour kind of pieces together. But I certainly like this one. It gets a thumbs up from me. It leans a little bit more towards the grainy and kind of resinous side of things the further you go into the aftertaste, but you do get a little bit more sweetness out of it the more that you drink of it. So yeah, I like how this one goes together. So thumbs up to Beerbliotek for this. It is pretty damn nice. In terms of the in terms of the mouthfeel, then let's focus on that. In terms of that, you've got a nice. You do. I would describe this beer as being kind of top end to mid bodied, bottom end to full bodied. The carbonation's really quite smooth in this one. It's got a real sort of slickness to it, to be honest. It does have a real kind of nice slickness. So yeah, I'd say it's quite a slick beer. So yeah, kind of leaning towards that more oily end of the spectrum, and I'd say overall it does have a little bit of a kind of cleanliness to it as well. You can feel a little bit of the nice kind of pure water coming out of this one. But yeah, I'd say definitely top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied, smooth carbonation, really quite slick, and a slightly oily mouthfeel overall. In terms of bitterness, this one's got to be about 70-ish IBUs, I think. This has got a fair bit of IBU in it. I wouldn't say this is the most bitter of Imperial Reds or whatever that I've come across, but I think this does have a fair whack in it. This has got to have at least 70 IBUs, I would think. So I do like that about this one. So yeah, in terms of the yeah, 70 IBUs I think is about fair with this one. But yeah, the malt base, like I said, has a bit of a kind of graininess to it. That gives the beer almost, that sort of promotes the bitterness of the beer a little bit, the kind of rye kind of graininess that you get out of this one. But again, as I've said in previous reviews, I don't know whether you can count that towards the bitterness in these kind of beers. But yeah, there's a bit of sweetness to this one. It's quite a dark brown sugar actually that comes out of this one. It gets darker and darker the more you drink of it, but as I say, there is a wee bit of sweetness in there, and then you've got some nice kind of juicy fruity characters that come out of this one as well. As I say, it's quite an oily fruity note that this beer has. But overall, this is a really interesting one. It's quite different from the other beers that I've had from Beerbliotek before. It's another style that I hadn't tried from these guys before. So I would like to see them do these again, and it'd be nice to see them try the other end of the spectrum with these too, like, you know, a slightly sweeter Imperial Red. That would be another interesting thing for Beerbliotek to try. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one just now. This has been a really interesting beer to try, and again, this goes to show you when Beerbliotek try different styles, they do tend to do them really nicely. So yeah, this one is called the Back to the Middle and Round Again, number 291, an Imperial Red Ale coming in at 8.5% ABV from Beerbliotek in Gothenburg. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Beerbliotek as well. If you do have any Imperial Red recommendations, I would love to see those below as well. But thank you for watching. Check out my social media, as I said, and I will see you guys very, very soon. The Back to the Middle and Round Again, Beerbliotek always do this with their names. They love big long names. But yeah, the Back to the Middle and Round Again, number 291, an Imperial Red Ale at 8.5% ABV from Beerbliotek in Gothenburg on the west coast of Sweden. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Slanja, skål, cheers.